is the market headed from here? Who better than Atul Suri to talk about exactly that? Atul, hi. Great to have you in the studios. ET now turns 17 today, by the way.
Congratulations. I think you've been around ever since.
No, 16 years.
Oh.
But yes, long enough. But the one thing that hasn't changed is that yellow sheet.
Yeah, the left sheet in the furniture.
Has always stayed.
And Aisha, 16 years. That's a lot.
And Atul Suri.
That's a lot. Yeah.
But tell me, where does the market go from here? So much has happened from the weekend to now itself.
I mean, so much and hardly anything also. It's been almost 1.5 years.
If you look at the index, nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But news flow-wise, so much.
There's a lot happening. So it's been almost 1.5, 2 years. And you know, what has happened is that in the last few months, you'll notice that the market's not making new lows, right? The FI selling continues, barring crude falling, etc. You know, the bad news continued, the sentiment is bad, the world is into the AI trade, etc. All that conversation goes on. But one thing that I'm noticing is that the market is not making new lows. Right, 22,000 or something was where we were in March, if I'm not mistaken. Then we pulled up to 24,500. Again, now we are just at around 24,000. So what I feel is that the market's trying to make a base. For me, the level that I'll watch out for, where a breakout would actually tell me that we could actually make a move towards new lifetime highs, would be 24,500, which is about 2% from here. That's another 500 points. And I also think the triggers are there. See, one very big problem was that the way crude had moved. And you'll find that crude also is falling at the same pace. My sense is that we would see crude around $65 to $70, which is where actually this rally started from. And when crude was at those levels, we had almost touched, in fact, we had nudged the new lifetime highs. So I do think that this fall in crude prices, which is also having an impact on currency, plus the RBI doing some stuff out there. So I do think the triggers are there. Yes, the narrative hasn't changed, yet it is like SpaceX that is dominating, or the AI trade is dominating your thought process. No one's talking about India, but subtly, you know, things are not so bad. There is no narrative, there is no storytelling, there's no optimism out there. So people are really getting frustrated, and it's like, it's a time-wise correction, you know, which is very excruciating. But in this way, I think very subtly bases get made. And as I said, if 24,500 gets taken out, which as I said is just 2 minutes, it can happen in 1 or 2 days. Who knows, you know, if something good comes out. I do think that we could make a move to this 26,500 or thereabouts, which has been lifetime highs. So in this whole scenario, again, all stocks are not bad. Some stocks are doing good. Some sector indices are doing well. So there are silver linings. There's just lack of narrative. There's the sentiment is not good.
Where is the momentum going to come from?
So like what I feel is that the sector that I would look at is the most important sector, that is banks. If you see the bank Nifty, you realize that what I told you about 24,500, this was the high we made sometime in May. Yeah. And then we again came off. The bank Nifty's almost crossed that level, almost there. So I feel that I can clearly see leadership in banks. Banks are important because why is because the weightage it has in the Nifty. It really pulls the biggest punch. And you can see also IT is no longer following more. They're not making new 52-week lows. They are forming a base. Yes, they have some good days, some bad days, but incremental fall is not there. So I do think that banks can be an area. Plus, you have a lot of subsectors. Like one thing I'm seeing is that if you look at stocks at 50 new highs or 52-week highs, that there is a certain thematic play. It's not a sector, but if you look at suppliers to data centers, right? We don't have the LLM plays, we don't have the SpaceX, etc. But definitely what you see is that there's a lot of investments going into data centers. Again, we cannot participate in those companies, but companies that are suppliers to data centers, you'll notice that a lot of those stocks are moving higher. They're more in the mid-cap space. That is why you'll find that the mid-cap index is actually near lifetime highs, almost there. So there is a very differentiated market. Yes, I know I'm looking for silver lining in a scenario where most people are bearish and negative. But I guess at the end of the day, you know, that is what our job is as fund managers, to look for those bright spots, look for those trends. And if a new bull market starts, which it will someday, you will hopefully have the leaders, and that's when you will do a very big catch-up.
Are you looking at silver, though, talking about silver lining, considering that was the mega trade all through last year?
That's interesting, no, Aisha, see how narrative changes, right? 6 months or 3 months ago, every time people wanted to forget equities, gold and silver, gold and silver, multi-asset funds, right? Now nobody's talking about it because everyone's stuck. A lot of people came towards that end parabolic move. And if you see that they have sort of, collapsed
Cooled
quite
off
a bit.
from there,
I personally don't think that silver and gold can make massive up moves. Yes, they will spurt up, but I feel that they will be selling at higher levels. Where I feel bullish in the commodity space is the industrial metals. I do think things like copper, etc., zinc, aluminum's correcting a bit now, but even after some time, I feel aluminum will do well. I feel very, very bullish on these metals, industrial metals. And even here, that whole data center play comes in because these are the things that are going to be used for this whole electrification. I think there's a very big shift that is happening in the whole power energy space. And it is a very big reality shock for all governments of the world that, hey, these fossil fuel lines are not constant. I mean, we may have had a deal, but how is this deal going to be implemented? Iran any day wants is going to come out and send a few drones and, crude oil can spike up $10. So I think that there is a big move, big investment that's going to happen in these areas. And as I said that, for want of better words, the theme I'm thinking is that all suppliers for people who set up data centers are stocks that are going to do well.
So when you say data center play and AI-centric play which is coming in, and many of them are in the mid-cap space,
right?
Which are the companies that you look at?
Ajit, I cannot talk about companies, but I'll tell you it's very simple. It's a no-brainer. Just look at your screen. Look at the stocks making new highs with the market well off, maybe 10, 12% off the highs. A lot of sectors are 15, 20%, like IT is off, real estate is off. In that, there are still a lot of stocks and sectors that are trending. And I guess that's the way you will have to play it. And then look for a common theme. As I said, it's something that I've created. There's no such thing as data center suppliers. But you will find that wires and cables, okay, that's where the play happens. You'll find some of these electronic manufacturers. Cooling systems. So you'll find that these are themes. They're very niche plays. But if you run across a bit horizontal rather than vertical, yes, you will find that, hey, there is a concept, there is a theme, and that's how it's playing out.
So the theme is playing out outside the benchmark indices.
Definitely.
And there's no momentum for the benchmark indices except for if banking does a catch up.
Absolutely.
And within banking, private sector has to perform so for it to catch up.
Right.
Do you think private sector has enough tailwind for that?
Yes, you can see that because again in the bank nifty you see there's a very differential performance between private sector banks and public sector banks. Even among private sector banks you see some of the mid cap. They're not mid caps really, but among the smaller, barring the top 2 or 3, I would say, you know what I mean. You'll find that those stocks are behaving very differently. So I feel that these legs are there. And also what is happening is, that refresh or cleanup is a part of every economic activity. The same thing is happening with our index. Our index also needs to be cleaning up because a lot of those old kings who've dominated for 5, 10, 15 years, who are the largest top 5 holders, maybe a lot of smaller players need to come up. So what you're seeing is also a churn within the index, the weightages, components. Of course, it's a long-term process, but as I said, the good to great journey. There is a lot of good to great journey that is happening in the Indian mid-cap space. That is why the mid-cap index is a very different story from the large-cap index.
Because there's earnings following the mid-cap index, but there's no earnings following the benchmarks.
Right, and you'll find that a lot of the large benchmark, if you see the kind of guidance, the growth, they're all low single-digit or single-digit. From that point of view, that's just inflation, yeah. At the end of the day, you need growth. You need companies surpassing or outperforming or relatively growing faster. That is where you are going to attract more capital. And that's why you will find that the index is saying a different story. At the ground level in the markets, there are pockets. Yes, it's not broad-based, it's not massive. But still, as I said, there are some pockets.
Is some bit of this also linked to liquidity, of course, and you track liquidity very closely as well.
Right.
How is that likely to play out? Private sector banks, therefore, some of the larger ones, maybe come back to the fore as liquidity comes back?
Certainly, what will happen is that now the big billion-dollar question is FII flows. And honestly, we've all been grappling with it. And I speak to a lot of friends who are in the FII broking firms, FII fund managers, etc. Really, we are not able to pin it down. Sometimes it was a case of high valuation. Sometimes it was about China. Now it's about AI. So every 6 months, there comes to be a new reason to sort of kick the can further. So from that point of view, really, I hope, I wish I can find reasons, but genuinely you don't know, you can't time it from that point of view. Domestic flows continue. There was a lot of thought that, what if Indian investors got negative returns for some time? Will this stuff stop? You find it's not stopping. Yes, the rate of change or the incremental increase in SIPs, lump sums has definitely decreased, but it is kind of plateaued out, which also is very good because that is not crisis. It's not moved negative yet. So I feel like that kind of will remain. And, I see globally, ultimately, the world chases momentum. Who wanted to touch Korea? If you can go and see, Korea was the worst performing market 2 years ago. Or Taiwan. People will not be able to find Taiwan on the map of the world. Right? Or Japan. Whenever you wanted to quote about a perpetual bear market, decadal bear market, people spoke about Japan. So you'll find how the narrative changes in all of 6 months. And that is what is happening right now. The narrative is against India. And what 6 months? In 6 weeks. 6 weeks, this narrative can change about India. So narrative is very, very fickle. Twitter is very, very fickle. You can see the index and you can see your opinions change, the comments change on your algos, right? So I think that is not going to be so important. Ultimately, as I said, that money chases momentum. The moment you start seeing momentum in India, suddenly people, the same guys who are underweighting India for all multiple reasons and can find 10 reasons, will say, boss, we to bought at the low. We to bought only small caps.
So therefore,
narrative is very, very
big question
fickle.
is when and what will the triggers be for this narrative?
I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. And that's what we've been struggling with for the last year and a half. As I said, first I remember when markets first fell, it was a case of overvaluation. Then it became China. Remember, China had holidays and it had gap up openings. It became about China. Go and look at the China chart. It's a disaster. Lot of EM charts are a disaster. Go look at Brazilian charts. They're a disaster. It's not just in India.
Yep.
I mean, I was hearing somebody talk about how the Korean FI flows have been negative all of last year. So ultimately, money chases momentum. Today, it's all about X. Where is all that money coming from? It's going from various geographies and going somewhere there. There are a couple of IPOs. If tomorrow the US starts correcting, suddenly money will flow. So it is momentum. The world chasing momentum. Momentum is not with India right now. Narrative is not there. But believe me, slight spurts, slight moves, this momentum surge comes in, the narrative will change. And suddenly you will find that, voila, it was such a different world.
When that narrative changes and, like you're saying, that is going to happen overnight, one who can't really predict that. One has to be well invested. Banks is one space that you talked about.
Sure.
You talked about the AI quasi-stack, if I can call it that. What else is looking like it's on a solid footing right now? When money starts pouring in, this is the place that you need to be.
So as I said, banks is a very big place, Aisha. And there also, as I said, barring the top few, down there are a lot of action happening. Like there are, again, as I said, cables and wires. Then you'll find industrial products, electronics. So you'll find there are multiple plays that do keep coming up. And as and when these emerge, like capital market plays, these are all sectors that you will find that some stocks do tend to trend up. There are earnings. These are not those low single-digit kind of growth earnings. You'll find that there are sector spaces that are happening. And we have to be nimble enough. We do not have to get stuck in those kind of plays because, as I said, that there is a big shift that is happening, even within the indexes, even within the weightages, which is the part of capitalism, that refreshes keep happening, and that is how our indexes are built, that is how weightages are done. So these are very self-correcting processes, and I think we are going through a very big one. A lot of these companies have had decadal moves. The largest banks, the largest IT companies, the largest whatever conglomerates, and you'll realize that now they're all growing at single-digit kind of place.
They're matured.
Why will the market, and they have not invested or they have not participated for good or bad, that's a different story. But there are a lot of other businesses which are growing 15, 20, 30%. So the market is going to reward them. Ultimately, just as money chases momentum, similarly earnings. Earnings and momentum are two things you need. That is what we do. Like, I'm a trend investor, I'm a momentum investor. What do I look for? I look for two things, earnings and price. You must have earnings. Without earnings, it always ends badly. And you need to have price, which needs to recognize that earnings. If you have that place, you'll find that those are the stocks getting rewarded.
Are you fascinated by what's happening in the US? You talked about Korea and Taiwan. I mean, look at SpaceX. You've got Anthropic and OpenAI in the pipeline next. What are those charts indicating?
No, I mean, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And what happens is that it's with a lot of jealousy,
Yeah, yeah.
envy, skepticism, pain.
All of it and more.
Matlab, very often,
Yeah.
when you see your neighbor making so much more money, it increases the pain. As I said that, okay, it's not that it's been so bad in India. People haven't lost money. It's been sideways.
Yeah.
Opportunity loss. Fair enough. People are saying FD, chalo, FD se to better hai. But the fact is, when you look at all these
That
countries,
disproportionate type.
wealth, and that also is theoretical, okay? Nobody's gone and invested in. Everyone knows about space, but in the end, including me, but how much I've invested? How many bought Korea? How many bought Taiwan? How many are in Japan today? So this is all mental.
On paper, yeah.
Mental, and this is
Yeah.
narrative. And these narrative is what sentiment is, and that narrative, as I said, is against India. This can change. Prices need to slightly. shoot up.
We have our own NSE and Geo IPO coming up.
Yes,
And will that be able to change the narrative and momentum?
I don't think so. In fact, what will happen is that, IPOs take away liquidity from the secondary market. And when you have such large IPOs, what will happen is that the secondary market per se may see some money move there. So I don't think that there's going to, in fact, if you see 2024, when we topped out, that was a crazy IPO market. And very often, a lot of IPOs, a lot of liquidity going into the primary market takes away little action from the secondary market. So I don't think they are going to be really positive. Yes, there's going to be more float, more liquidity, more large plays, which is great for the long term. But in the short term, which is we need to really figure this out, we need to take these breakouts, we need to push towards lifetime highs for some energy to come back, which has really been missing.
All right, Atul, thank you so much for
Thanks.
coming in and
Thanks
speaking
a
to
lot.
us. We'll let you go. Quickly,